Hey everyone, welcome. We will get started in just a minute. All right, we will get started. Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Jordan Wagman. I am with Now Micro, and I would like to do just a quick introduction for everyone. So, a little bit about Now Micro, just in case you aren't familiar with us. We've been around for over 30 years, and we've been a trusted partner in technology procurement, deployment, and management. So, thank you, first of all, for joining us today for this webinar event on migrating to Windows 11. We definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules. Just a note before we get started, following today's event, you will receive an email with a recording of the session, and wanted to call out that please do remember we're here to support you beyond just the webinar. So don't hesitate to reach out to us if you need anything at any time. And then for today's event, we will be talking about Windows 11. Migrating to a new operating system is definitely has its challenges, which is why we've organized this session to share some valuable tips and best practices around that. I do want to introduce our speaker today. So his name is John Anderson, and he is a senior systems consultant here at Now Micro. He will be doing the presentation for us. And then would like to also call out that during the session, we will have a chat and a Q&A box. So feel free to pop in some questions there if you have them. We'll do our best to answer those during the session. And if not, we will also have some time at the end of the session to answer some of those questions. So without further ado, I will hand it over to John to start the presentation.
Thanks, Jordan. Welcome everyone to today's TechConnect on migrating to Windows 11. The agenda is going to be pretty straightforward. Do some quick introductions here, and then we'll talk about the whole Windows 11 process. So system requirements, compatibility reporting, actually doing the upgrade, troubleshooting the upgrade, and then look at some new customizations and new features, and even do a little preview of 24H2 at the end of the presentation here. So as Jordan mentioned, I'm John Anderson. I'm a senior systems consultant here at Now Micro. I've been doing the consulting thing for almost 15 years now. Started out with ConfigMan 2007, 2012, years ago. These days, it's still ConfigMan, just current branch, and then a lot more Intune and cloud. I do have my email at the bottom of the slide there. So if you have a question that doesn't get answered today, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I can either answer your question or get you in touch with the right person. Again, if you're not familiar, I work for Now Micro. We're a company that's been around, as Jordan said, for over 30 years. We're based out of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And I like to tell people that we can kind of help with your whole device lifecycle process. So purchasing those devices, we're partnered with all the major hardware vendors and can get great pricing. Deploying those devices, so whether that's an Image Connect distribution point for ConfigMan imaging or autopilot and pre-provisioning. Ongoing management of those devices. We have professional services, which I'm a part of, field services for things like warranty repair, and then retiring the devices at the end of their life cycle. So recycling, we can even come and pick up recycling. And lastly, I want to call out our in-house developed DICE tool. It's an asset management tool at its core, but has additional features like real-time monitoring of hardware, system-level remote control, geolocation. It can work as a great companion to, say, an Intune environment. All right, so with the advertising out of the way, the meat of the presentation, upgrading to Windows 11. So the first question is, why should I upgrade to Windows 11? And the primary reason motivating most people is going to be that first bullet point. Windows 10 hits end of life October 14th of next year. So we've got about 1 year to get Windows 11 deployed in the environment and get away from Windows 10. There are some other reasons, though, to go. That there is a lot of improved security tools and features in Windows 11 compared to 10. You also get compatibility with the latest applications and the latest hardware with Windows 11. There is a much improved Copilot and AI integration for those of you that care about that. For others, it may be seen as a negative. And then there's also just an improved user experience. The File Explorer has tabbed browsing finally. The Windows Snap features are much better, virtual desktops, and other things that we'll look at later. So the first thing that you have to look at when you're starting to go to Windows 11 is the system requirements. I'm sure many of you are aware that Microsoft, kind of ratcheted up the requirements with Windows 11. And I do have a link in the slide deck here to the full list of system requirements. It'll be common things like enough memory, a big enough hard drive, a supported video card. But the ones I see cause people the most issues are the ones I've listed here. So the processor, the TPM, and then UEFI and Secure Boot. The TPM and UEFI and Secure Boot are ones that can usually be fixed. So you might have hardware that maybe just has the TPM disabled in the BIOS, or maybe UEFI is turned on but Secure Boot is turned off. Those are the kind of things that you can inventory through your management tool and then push out some sort of like a script solution to remediate. So oftentimes those, while they're blocking your upgrade, can be fixed. The one that can't be fixed is the processor. So in general, to go to Windows 11, you need to have an Intel 8th gen or newer processor or an AMD Ryzen 2000 or newer processor. If your processor is older than that, it's likely not supported. And I have linked to the supported processors list so you can go search. But yeah, if it's not supported, then you're kind of stuck. Your system is just not going to support Windows 11. So how do we find out about which devices are compatible or not? Fortunately, there's several options for this. So if you have Configuration Manager in your environment, there's a dashboard and a wealth of queries that can be run to gather this information. In Intune and Azure, there's several different reports that collect information and can give you, valuable data. And then just in the registry on every device, you'll also find compatibility information. So if you have some sort of a third-party tool that you want to use to report on this, you can collect those registry values. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. So I'm going to start in Configuration Manager here. And as I mentioned, there is a Windows 11 Upgrade Readiness dashboard in Configuration Manager. It's just under the software library here, and then Windows 11 Upgrade Readiness. You can see it gives you information about how many devices are on 10 and 11, what are the different feature update versions out there, and then a list of devices that are ready or not ready for the upgrade. There's also some additional classes here that I don't have in my demo environment. Maybe a driver needs updated. But the nice thing with these is they are click-through, so I can click into my cannot upgrade, and I get this device here. It's not able to do the upgrade, and then it nicely gives me a reason why. So on this particular device, there's no TPM, it's not running UEFI and Secure Boot, it's in legacy mode, and it doesn't have 4 gigs of memory. So lots of reasons that this device is incompatible. Beyond that, though, in Config Man, you're able to dive a lot deeper in through queries. So I just made a few example queries here. Maybe I want to see a list of all the processor models that exist in my environment. So I can export that to like Excel and go figure out which devices are going to need to be replaced. Or maybe I want a list of the Secure Boot status on all my devices. So I can create a collection and then deploy a script to enable Secure Boot on the devices where it's disabled. So Intune or Configuration Manager, great for looking at that stuff. Intune also has several reports available. So if we go to Intune here in the reports section, there's Windows Updates and then reports. And then within here, there's a feature update report, which just gives you general information about the feature update process, and we'll look at more at that one later. But then there's a feature update device readiness report and a feature update compatibility risks report. So when you run these reports, you can select, what operating system you're trying to go to. So in this case, Windows 11 23H2. And then maybe I want to see just my corporate owned devices and not my personal owned devices. And then I want to see devices that are, already upgraded, or maybe devices that need to be replaced. So you can kind of filter the report. My demo environment doesn't have a lot of great info here, so I do have a slide in the slide deck with a better look here. So in this environment, we've got 25 devices that need to be replaced and 3 devices that are, at a low risk or able to do the upgrade effectively. And then we can see in the listing here of the devices that need to be replaced, again, we get the reason why they're incompatible. So processor family, TPM, secure boot, etc. And then there's also, the compatibility risks report, which gives you a list of all the incompatible things found in the environment. So again, I have a slide here. So here we can see the reports run, and we've got several apps and drivers that are problematic. And way over on the right, right in the middle here, we can see how many devices are affected, and you can click into that to get a listing of devices. And then over on the right, we've got, what will happen. So in this case, apps will get removed during the upgrade, or the driver will not properly migrate. So that tells us we need to do like an app update or a driver update or something prior to doing the upgrade. And then finally, there's a Windows Update for Business report over in the Azure portal that also gives the same type of information. So this is under the monitoring and then workbooks and Windows Update for Business. And then there's feature updates in here that'll give you a listing of the devices that you have out there. And then again, if devices are capable or not capable of moving to Windows 11, and again, the reason, processor family, whatever it might be. And the last thing to mention, there's so many different options to look at this data, is back over in Intune. There's also endpoint analytics. So if you have devices enrolled into endpoint analytics, you also get information under here in the work from anywhere and Windows. So again, we see the listing of devices, whether or not they're capable, and the reason for not being capable. So lots of options in Configuration Manager, Intune, Azure to collect this information. But where does that information all come from? And that is on the device itself. So here I've got a Windows 10 device. And if you open up the Windows Task Scheduler on any of your devices and look under Microsoft Windows Application Experience, you'll find this task for the Microsoft Compatibility Appraiser. So this is a built-in task from Microsoft that runs regularly. You can also run it on demand if you want. And when this task runs, it writes to the registry, which is this location here. I've got the path up at the top, and I also have the path in the slide deck for reference. But you can see it checks the compatibility for each version of Windows that's available. So in this case here, I'm on the 23H2 one. And you can see it tracks all sorts of data, when it ran, if there's safeguard holds in place, if like the hard drive doesn't have enough space. But the main thing you'll want to look at is this red reason key. So this device is incompatible because it doesn't have a TPM. So the red reason is TPM. But then I've got another device here that is capable. So the red reason is none, meaning it's able to go to that feature update. So if you have a third-party tool that you want to inventory these settings with, this is the registry location to look at. All right, so let's get back into the slide deck here. So the Microsoft Compatibility Appraiser task, I just wrote it down in the slide deck so that you have a reference of where that task is and where the registry key is. So now we've got incompatible devices, and we need to know what are our options for dealing with those incompatible devices. So obviously the best thing to do is resolve the compatibility issues if we can. If we've got devices that just need a TPM enabled, or secure boot or UEFI enabled, maybe add some additional RAM, that would probably be the best route to go down. If you have devices that are not compatible, so maybe like the processor is just too old, then we have to look at other options. So the first option there is simply just to purchase new hardware, replace those incompatible devices. And I'll once again mention here, Now Micro is partnered with all the major hardware vendors and would love to talk to you about that. If you don't want to replace all of your, or maybe you've got too many devices, it's not in the budget right now to replace all that hardware, there are some other options. So Microsoft is once again going to have an extended security updates program for Windows 11 or Windows 10. So you'll be able to pay an annual subscription fee and get up to 3 years of additional updates for Windows 10. They haven't released for sure pricing or anything on that yet, but I did include a link to the documentation about that program. There's also the long-term servicing channel of Windows 10. So this is a build of Windows 10 that has been around, basically since the beginning of Windows 10. You just might not have seen it as much since it's not generally used for standard end user type devices. You would more run long-term servicing channel on like IoT devices, digital signage, a device running your door lock system, something like that. It can be installed on standard end user devices, but it is lacking in features compared to the general availability version of Windows. But it does have update support available until the late 2020s. The dates kind of change depending on which version you have specifically, but it is longer. So if you've got licensing for LTSC, that is an option. And finally, your last option is just to run Windows 11 in an unsupported configuration. So this is definitely not recommended, as there's a lot of caveats here. Microsoft has said, running Windows 11 in an unsupported configuration, they're not going to guarantee that you'll continue to receive updates in the future. Some of the features of the operating system just won't work, things that require, maybe like TPM or something. And you might have possible system instability, so crashes, that type of thing, and Microsoft is not really going to do a whole lot to help you with that. So you can do this if you've got, configuration manager or some sort of imaging tool. You can just lay down an image of Windows 11 on a device that doesn't actually support it, and it will run. But if you're going to go down that route, I would recommend doing extensive testing ahead of time to try to weed out any of those, system instability issues. So now we've kind of looked through all the compatibility stuff, we're ready to actually do a Windows 11 upgrade. So what are the options available for doing that? Again, several options available. We've got Configuration Manager, where we can push out the upgrade as like just a Windows update through the software update point and WSUS integration. We've got the task sequences, where we can do an in-place upgrade task sequence and kind of take a more detailed control over the process. And then we've got Windows Update for Business. So this is where we configure devices to get updates directly from Microsoft. And this is more and more a popular option these days, I see, with all the different clients I'm working with. It kind of takes a lot of the headache of managing updates out of your hands and has Microsoft deal with it. So a Windows Update for Business settings can be configured by both Intune and Group Policy. And then finally, there is just a manual upgrade option. If you have one-off devices here and there, you can just copy the setup media down to a device and run the setup.exe manually, or even script the setup.exe. Okay, so let's take a look at what some of the upgrade stuff looks like. So I need to go on client 2. And Configuration Manager. So I mentioned Configuration Manager can be used to do the upgrades. So in the software library here, there is Windows servicing and then all the feature updates. So you can synchronize all the feature updates through WSUS and then do a search for updates. Maybe I want to see all the updates that are required in my environment. And then I'd find, in this case, 23H2, right-click, download it to a deployment package, which I've already done here. Put it in a software update group, and then that software update group can be deployed out to a collection. And you can make that available so users can choose to install it at their own pace. You can make it required, maybe team it with like a maintenance window. It gives you kind of a lot of options for making that upgrade available. If you don't want to do the update or the upgrade via an update, there is also task sequences. So you can download the Windows 11 media and import it into ConfigMan as a operating system upgrade package. And then you can reference that in an upgrade task sequence. So I've got just a very basic upgrade task sequence here. But in general, the benefit of the task sequence, if you want to go this route, is you get more control before and after the upgrade process. So you've got the upgrade the operating system step in the task sequence here, which is basically applying the update. But before that, you could do things like update drivers or removing compatible apps. And then after the upgrade, you could do things like maybe want to hide the widgets shortcut or set a custom start menu layout or taskbar layout, that type of thing. Generally, the task sequence I find is a little bit more of a it's not as user friendly as just the Windows Update is. But if you need that extra control, it is a good option. So what does that look like on a client? So I've got a config man client here with the software center. And if I push the update out via a Windows Update, you can see it shows up here as an update. I can choose to install it, or if it was required, it would automatically install. The task sequence will show up under operating systems as the upgrade task sequence, which I could also choose to install. Okay, so we're done with that machine. So then the next option besides config man is Windows Update for Business. And like I said, there's kind of two different ways to configure those settings. So one of them is just via group policy. So you can see I've got a group policy here that's configuring the Windows Update for Business settings, which are just under Computer, Administrative Templates, Windows Components, Windows Update. And with Windows Update for Business, you're basically just saying, how do these devices get their updates from Microsoft? So you can set a deferral period where the device will wait X number of days after an update is released before installing it. In this case, I've got the policy set to 0, but you might do like 2 days for a pilot group and 7 days for a production group, something like that. You can also set a target feature update version. So you can see here I've set Windows 11 23H2 as the target version. You could also set a different version if you didn't want to go to 23H2. And then you can specify deadline settings for the policy. So how many days is the update available to be installed for the end users? Once it does install, how many days does the user have to reboot the computer before it's automatically rebooted for them? So those settings are all configurable via group policy, but then they're also available out here in Intune. So in Intune, under your devices, there's the Windows 10 and later updates. And I've got just another example policy created here. And we can see it's got all the same settings. So deferral settings, deadline settings, active hours, all the different settings you would need to configure to push out updates to your devices. And I prefer to use the Intune settings if you can, because they have some nice controls just built right into the settings here, where you can pause updates, maybe uninstall the most recently installed update if there was a problem. And then in Intune here, there's also feature updates along the top where you can, again, identify what is the feature update you want to push out. So in this case, I'm just sending Windows 11 23H2 to everyone, but you might have several different feature update policies and have, different ones targeted at different groups of devices, right? Okay, so that's those settings. And then I wanted to boot up a couple of VMs here quick, just to show you what those settings look like on a device. Bear with me for just a moment. It's always fun doing the live demos. Okay. Well, if I can type my password. Really can't, I guess. There we go. Caps lock? No. Oh, that's right. There we go. Okay. So this device is the one that's getting the settings from group policy. So if, again, you want to verify those settings, they do show up in the registry. Group policy settings are going to be under software, policies, Microsoft, Windows, Windows Update. and you can see all those Windows Update for Business settings applied here. And then that should allow us just to go into the Settings app, update, and do a check for updates, and hopefully see that 23H2 update come down. There we go. So Windows 11 version 23H2 is now downloading. And then the same thing over on our other demo device. So this is one that's getting the Windows Update for Business settings from Intune. So those settings exist in a different location. They're under Software, Microsoft, Policy Manager, Current Device Update. And again, you can see all the same Windows Update for Business settings here, just in the Intune policy location. And then that provides the same thing where the feature update is now available. We don't need to wait for it to show up here, but it'll show up just the same as it did on the other device. All right, so close out of that, and that. That can turn off, and that can turn off. And back to the slideshow. So I did take a quick video here of just the whole upgrade process from start to finish so you can see what it looks like. So if we start the video here, we'll do a check for updates, and it'll find the 23H2 update as available and start downloading it. After the download, it goes to the install. And once the install completes, I'll get notified that there's a pending reboot on my machine. So your users will see this notification slide out from the right. Your organization requires your device to restart. They have an option to pick a time later or just restart now. Again, this is the experience through Windows Update for Business. Once they do the restart, the feature update process proceeds here. This is obviously sped up. For reference, this is like an ideal, clean virtual machine on fast hardware, but in real time, the download took about 5 minutes. The background installation took about 25 minutes. And then the reboot, the actual user interruption part, only took about 3 minutes. So they've made great progress with, putting a lot of the feature update process in the background and then having that reboot be less intrusive to your end users. I encourage you to test on your own hardware and see, what kind of times you get. But yeah, it's been pretty smooth in my experience moving to Windows 11. Okay, so the next thing we want to look at then is troubleshooting. So what if we have something go wrong with the upgrade process? There's several options that we can have for looking at troubleshooting. One of them is just the reports, once again, out in Intune and Azure. There's also Setup Diag, which is a tool provided by Microsoft that we can use to run and kind of parse all the log files. There's also log files and error codes. So if you do look through the log files and you get like a cryptic message, you can go reference one of Microsoft's docs pages to figure out what that error actually means. And then down at the bottom, I've just included a link to Microsoft's documentation on kind of like a technical deep dive into the upgrade process, if you want to get, even more details about what's going on behind the scenes. So go next slide here. And let's take a look at what the troubleshooting actually looks like. So as I mentioned, you can look at the Intune reports. So they do just have this feature update report where we can run it and we can say, show me the settings or the information for the Windows 11 23H2 update that I'm pushing out. And then maybe just show me company-owned devices and show me devices where they're just in an error state. Or maybe the user canceled the update, or maybe there was a rollback that got initiated. So I can run that report and see all that data. And again, I've actually got a slide in here that gives a little bit better look at this. So here's the report and environment where we have the update going. We can see we've got a device here that's in a pending state. The update has been scheduled and it's in progress. We've got some other devices here where it's already been give you that failed information here, and then it'll, under the alert column, it'll give you some basic information about why the failure happened. Also, out in that Windows Update for Business report that I mentioned before too, you can go see the same type of information. So that's just another option to look at the same report. And then if we have access to the device itself, so if I switch back over here, the Windows logs are kind of spread out between several different areas, but they'll generally be in this Windows BT folder on the root of the C drive, which you have to show hidden files to see it. And there is a setup diag tool that runs when there's a failure, but you can also download the setup diag tool as a standalone exe, which I have a link in the slide deck to it. So if you have that tool here, I can just open up a new PowerShell window. And then I can run that tool. I'm just going to run it with the /output parameter and tell it where to put the log files. And then that tool runs and analyzes the upgrade process that happened on this device. It looks through all the different Windows log files that exist and tries to give me a better error about what happened. So once that's done running, I can go look at the results. And there is just a results summary here that tries to give you some information. So the error was an abrupt down level failure, which doesn't tell me a whole lot, but it does give me a error code. So what I can do is copy that, and then I can go out to Microsoft's website where they have all the common error codes and just search that in here. And we see that means the system didn't pass the minimum requirements to install the update. So I know I've got a system compatibility problem of some sort. So what I could do then is extract the log files that setup diag captured here. And if I go in there, I could look at, say, the scan result, which does a compatibility scan of the device. And I see that there is a blocking, like a hard block for the TPM. So that tells me that there's a TPM problem on this device. So running the setup diag tool is a great way to kind of look through those logs a little bit more easily, rather than having to try to follow the process through all the different log files that exist, which you can do as well using the Microsoft documentation. The other thing that might cause an issue here with the upgrade is the idea of a safeguard hold. So if Microsoft identifies that there's a particular hardware model or application or something that's causing a problem with the upgrade midstream, Microsoft will put a safeguard hold for that device or any device that has like that given app or something until that's resolved. And then Microsoft will remove the safeguard hold, which will allow the feature update to start rolling again. The Intune, the Azure report, the Windows Update for Business report, does tell you about safeguard holds. So if you go under the feature update node here, there is this safeguard holds area where if we did have those in place, you would see them here. So if you're in a situation where you have devices that really seem like they should be taking the update and they're just not for whatever reason, I would check to see if there's a safeguard hold in place. Okay. So that, I believe, is the end of the troubleshooting section. Yep. So we did the demo there. So the next thing then is, now that we've got Windows 11 set up, how do we customize it and get it looking and feeling the way that we want? So some common things that you might want to do with Windows 11 is set a custom start menu layout, taskbar layout. Maybe you want to disable certain features or hide certain features. Copilot, recall, widgets. Those are all common ones that I see people turn off. Turn this off. Start that. All right. So looking at each of these items, we've got the start menu customization. There's kind of two different ways to do a lot of these things. You can set them as a preference or a policy. So the preference is setting like a default that the user is able to change. And the policy is setting the policy as forced, where the user can't effectively change it. So for the start menu, to set a preference, you just manually configure the start menu on a device. And then there's a start.bin file that you copy out of this app data path. And then you can copy that into like the default user profile or just overwrite other users' start bin files, and it'll set the default layout. If you want to force it, you can actually run a PowerShell command to export the start layout that you have into a JSON file. And then there is a Intune policy object to apply that JSON file through a CSP. I don't believe there's a group policy method to do this for Windows 11, so you would have to resort to like a PowerShell script or something then if you do want to do this without Intune. For the taskbar, same type of thing. You've got preference and policy. The preference option would be to configure the taskbar XML file, and then again, copy that XML file into the default user profile or whatever user profile. And then for the policy option, you do the same thing. You configure the layout XML, and then you use either the Intune CSP there or the group policy to apply that taskbar layout to the devices. In addition to those, there's the shortcuts and features. So I've got here the widgets, Copilot, and recall, the CSP, and the group policy that you can use to disable each of those. So let's take a quick demo of what that looks like. So if we go back out to Intune here, I've already built a couple of settings that go through and customize Windows 11. So I've got this one here that's built as a settings catalog object. Whenever it eventually loads, there we go. So if I edit the settings, we can see we've got all sorts of different things in here. So like the start menu, I've got the configure start pins value, and then I've got the JSON value put in here. The widgets, not allowed, Copilot, disabled, default app associations, put in there. The start layout here as well. So it's kind of misleading. The start layout is actually the taskbar layout because it used to be for Windows 10. Now it's Windows 11. So you put the XML in there. And to kind of better show you what those look like, I've got them just in the notepad window here. So the start layout would end up looking like this. That's pretty standard JSON file. Your taskbar is going to be an XML file, and then your default app associations will also be an XML file. So how do you actually get these files is probably your next question. So let me switch over to another VM here. Okay, so I've got a VM where I want to get things customized. So for the start menu, what I can do is go through and just manually set up, all the different pins that I want on the start menu. And once I've got it looking the way I want, again, we have the two options, the preference or the policy. So if I want to do the policy object, I can run the PowerShell command to export that start layout. So export start layout, and then just the path where you want to put the JSON file. And then we get the JSON file right there, which I could then go put into that Intune policy that we just looked at. Same type of thing for the default app associations. You just go through the settings on the device. So if you go into settings, apps, default apps, you can set whichever apps you want to be the default apps on the device. And then once you've done that, open up a command window here and run this dism command to export the default app associations to an XML file. And we get that as well. Now the taskbar layout is a little bit different. There's not a great way to export the taskbar layout. Instead, what you want to do is get a example XML file, which you can do from, I linked it in the slide deck to the Microsoft Docs that has the layout, but you'd get this XML here effectively, and then you add lines here for each app that you want to pin to the taskbar. So for instance, if I want to pin something else here, I could add a new line, paste this, and then I just need to put in the app identifier here. And the way that you can get that is on the device. You can just run the PowerShell commandlet for get-start apps, and then I'm just sorting it alphabetically here. So it gets you a listing of all those apps that are installed, and then what the app ID is. So for instance, if I wanted to pin, I don't know, the Microsoft Media Player, I could copy that value here and then go paste it into my XML file. And then that will now be pinned there as well. And if you don't want to do these settings through Intune or group policy, you can also do them through PowerShell. So I've got like example PowerShell scripts here for set the start menu layout, set the taskbar layout, where you'd just be copying the XML or like the start.bin file as more of a preference. So there's several different ways that you can go about getting these customizations handled. So yeah, that's most of the customization side of things. So then the next thing or the last thing to talk about really is just what are some of the new features that are available in Windows 11. So base Windows 11 or what's available up till now, 23H2, some of the common things you'll see is just the start menu obviously looks different. The taskbar is centered in the middle of the screen. File Explorer now supports tabbed browsing. Finally, that's been in development for quite some time. There's also improved window snapping and snap groups. And then the settings application has also been beefed up. They're in their, ever never ending, it seems like, quest to get rid of the control panel. But the settings app is starting to actually get better. And we can take a look just on the Windows 11 device here. You can see the File Explorer does now have tabs along the top. So instead of having a bunch of windows open, you can just have a bunch of tabs open, just like in your web browser. The start menu, the taskbar, there is an option to move this back to the left. Some people do. I mean, when I'm looking at customizing Windows, I usually like to try to leave it kind of, more closer to the out of box state, figuring a lot of people are going to have Windows 11 at home already, and they're probably using it in the default state. We don't want to necessarily change our work configuration to be too different from the home configuration, or, that might start to add extra confusion, right? So yeah, the File Explorer, we've got the window snapping, which is cool. If you drag a window up to the top, there's this snap thing that comes down. You can see you can snap the window wherever. So I could maybe put File Explorer here next to my Notepad window. And then now, if I minimize those, if I go to restore them again, I could restore just the File Explorer window, or I've got a group here, and I could restore both windows. So kind of a cool feature. And then the settings app, like I said, I'm not going to go through the whole settings app, but it has been improved. There's a lot more stuff that was in the control panel on Windows 10 that now can be found in the settings app on Windows 11. All right, so turn that one off. So then the last thing I want to talk about is Windows 11 24H2. So this has been in release preview for a while, but Microsoft did announce that it's going to be officially available as an optional update on September 24th, and it'll be generally available with the October patch cycle. So Patch Tuesday is October 8th this year. And this also has several new features. So much improved Copilot integration for those of you that care about Copilot. It also has native support for 7-zip and tar files now. You can zip and unzip without needing to install extra software. And they also added a new feature, sudo for Windows. So those of you that are familiar with Linux, using the sudo command to elevate from a command prompt, you can now do the same thing within Windows. So running a command without having to open a separate administrative command window. So we can take a quick look at that here too. I do actually have a device running 24H2. So yeah, as I mentioned, Copilot has been kind of moved into its own app. So it's like an actual separate app now. You can still use the same policy setting that we showed earlier, though, to disable Copilot if you don't want this to be used in your organization. There is the native support for the zips now. So I've got a file on my desktop here. If I right click on that, I can compress to, and I've got zip, but I've also got 7-zip and tar. So I can natively do that without having 7-zip actually installed on this machine. And then if I have a zipped file, so this is a 7-zip file, I can natively extract it as well. So nice having that. It might allow you to get rid of an additional piece of software off your machine that you have to, don't have to worry about patching. And then finally, there's the sudo tool. So I can go in a regular non-administrative window here and, just run command like normal, ping localhost. And it works just like normal. But then I can also run sudo. And then when I run that, it gives me a UAC window, which I could then authenticate at, and it'll run the command as administrator without me needing to open a separate administrator window. If you do want to use the sudo tool, I should note too, you have to go in the settings app, and then there's developer tools or developer settings. And then down at the bottom here, you can flip enable sudo to on. All right. So a lot of information pretty quickly, but that kind of is a quick look at the start to finish process for upgrading to Windows 11 and then getting it customized. So we've got 10 minutes or so here now where we can take questions. So if anyone has them, feel free to put them in the chat and I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, John. We did have one come in that we'll start with here.
Sure.
So Mike says, Intel Microsoft had a requirement that Windows 11 could only be used on 8th gen or higher CPUs. Is that still the case? Sounds like he had tested Windows 11 on an Intel 7th gen processor and it was slow.
Yeah, so the officially supported configuration, it's generally still Intel 8th gen and newer. There are certain 7th gen processors that are supported, but they're kind of few and far between. Um, so yeah, if you want to be officially supported, it'll be Intel 8th gen or newer. And again, you can refer to the officially supported processors list that I've got a link to in the slide deck. And again, you can run Windows 11 on older unsupported hardware, but it is generally going to be slow or a bit unstable.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? You can pop them in the chat quick. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we will also be sending out the recording to everyone. We had one more come through. So it says, does Microsoft allow the ability to download the feature update enablement package to perform manual flips of feature updates?
So you're talking about like the not the full install media, just the enablement. I don't know if you can download that just like to manually run, but you can definitely download those within like Configuration Manager or if you do Windows Update for Business, when the device goes and does its update, if there's enablement, if there is an enablement package available, it'll just automatically use the enablement package. Same thing if you deploy the update through Configuration Manager, you'll often see there's an enablement package and a full update. So you can deploy whichever one you'd like.
Thank you. Says correct, but want to use it outside of Windows Update.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a real way to do that. I would assume you could go grab the enablement files from like the content delivery network, but it's not something that I've personally tried doing.
Okay. We had another one come in that says, when using policies to control the start menu, does this restrict the user from adding their own shortcuts? Or does it erase user-added shortcuts when the policy is reapplied?
Yeah, so the policy option where you export the start layout to like a JSON file and then apply that using the CSP, it'll when it first applies, it'll overwrite all the stuff that the user already has there. And then the user will be able to modify it. They'll be able to pin and unpin things. But then next time they log out and log in or reboot, it'll re-overwrite it with the default layout again. So I find that that's not a very good user experience. I prefer to do the more of the preference route where you just copy the start.bin file and set the initial defaults and then just let the users change them from there.
Thank you. We also had a question come in about getting access to the links within the PowerPoint. And I will say, yes, following the event here, we will not only email out the recording, but we will also have a place in our blog where I will upload the slides that include the link. So I'll make sure everyone in this meeting has access to all of those materials. And that looks like it's the last question that came in. Once again, Please reach out to us further if you have questions come up later on or when you review the presentation after we send it out. We are always available to help. So thank you so much, John. That was a great presentation, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everyone.